Spring Television. Ours it is.
All right, it's the morning after two notable extensions in the Nigerian socio-economic space, and of course the Monday after the ruling of the Election Petitions Tribunal here in Osun State. On that note, we welcome you to the program Morning Spring this beautiful morning. It's Monday, the 30th of January, 2023. 1 day to the end of the month. That's my own countdown now. 11 days to the expiration, the new expiration date of the cash swap policy. My name is Emmanuel Ujadegele. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning. We're reaching you live from Star Times channel 190 on the DTT platform. You can follow the conversation on all our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at WSTV_NG. And of course, you can check us out on YouTube, where you can catch up on all the other programs you've missed, and also follow us live at Western Spring Television. Remember to subscribe to our channel. I'm not alone in the studio this morning. Surprisingly, Temitope is on a very high note this morning. I don't know what's happening.
Yes, I am, because I had a very great weekend,
Oh.
Yes, I slept well. All right, so it's been a very, very hectic month, what with the deadlines and the scarcity, the queues at filling stations. But then we still managed to pull through. All right, I'm Temitope Ajijala. Thanks for joining us on the Morning Spring this morning on Western Spring Television.
Temitope says she has what is it? Terrific or great weekend? Is that
Great.
A great weekend. Wow.
I slept well.
She slept well. Fantastic. She slept well. Some of us don't have the luxury of sleeping well because we're too burdened by Nigeria's problems. So we're always fasting and praying for the betterment of the country. Okay. To see that the country goes.
Bless you all.
And so that's just part of the job of taking it upon ourselves. And of course, some of us sleep alone, so we don't have great weekends. Anyway, when we come back from this break, we'll bring you the papers and tell you what's happening on the national dailies and who and what is in the news. Okay, so welcome back to the show. It's time to tell you what's happening on the papers. We're all smiles this morning because it's the end of the month, of course. It's a beautiful Monday, and some persons slept well. And so it's good to, it's good to sleep well.
And others have been fasting.
Temitope, let's just go to the papers this morning. So we'll start on the Punch newspaper. That's where we'll begin our journey with the national dailies this morning. The Punch newspaper, the banner headline says, New Naira, anger spreads over scarcity, reps oppose CBN extension. Customers, that's the number of riders now, customers stranded, ATMs empty as worshippers dump old notes in churches. CBN deploys 30,000 super agents nationwide to boost cash swap program. Emefiele says 1.9 trillion naira old notes deposited, projects 900 billion naira before deadline. That's I'm surprised that the reps are opposing the CBN extension. They've been calling for it.
Yeah.
Same thing with other people. But the issue, the major issue here now, for me personally, is the availability of the Naira. I tweeted yesterday that the extension will be an exercise in futility if the notes are not available. You can't extend the deadline when you've not made the note available. It's very worrisome. Customers are stranded.
Yes, but Emefiele has also noted that some banks have been hoarding the non-Naira notes. We don't know why they've been hoarding, several reasons, could cause that, but they've been hoarding, according to him. And he says that sanctions will be made, given to banks that are found, guilty of such. But then, if the CBN also needs to work on more notes in circulation, as well as also apprehending or stopping, banks that are doing such or engaging in such. But then the CBN has also been trying, deploying about 30,000 super agents worldwide to boost the cash swap program. So, at least now we know that the rope would be a little bit released on the neck of Emefiele. We've been talking about deadlines and
Yes.
extension.
Yes,
and
please.
so it has extended.
Yes, finally, Murphy Baby has some sort of reprieve. But I'm also worried. Good news, we've mopped up 1.9 trillion naira. Very good news. But I'm also worried that despite the fact that the notes are scarce for ordinary people, politicians seem to have large deposits of the large bundles of the money. I saw a number of videos at events over the weekend, and multiple celebrities, even people who were not celebrities, funfair, seekers, had this money to spray around, which in itself it's flouting the CBN, rule, defacing the naira. But then, if celebrities or party goers have the note in abundance to spray around, why can the market not have it?
Exactly.
There's a very big problem.
So that goes to show that somewhere Emefiele is right. Banks are hoarding it for, to serve their own purposes. So something needs to be done to stop that immediately.
Of course.
So that the reason for this policy can be achieved.
Well, we'll move away from that story. The new Naira note, we hope that more is done to make it available to Nigerians, because it was going to cause issues. We must say that some persons had begun rejecting the old notes. Some traders who themselves do not have the new notes.
Exactly. We need to point that out.
All right, so away from Naira, let's move on to Lagos, where there's a Lagos and Ondo, where we have very sad stories. Yesterday was a bloody Sunday, very dark Sunday. 11 persons died in a road crash in Ondo State, but in Lagos, a container fell on a passenger bus and crushed 9 persons. I saw some of the videos. They were too gory to really look at.
Yes.
But when people say they want to leave the country, these are some of the things. These are some of the reasons why. I can't imagine for the life of me that a vehicle carrying a container in the United Kingdom, for instance, I've never read of it. It may have happened, but I've never heard it. That a container falls off a vehicle in the United Kingdom and crushes. I mean, first of all, why are they moving during the day? Second of all, why is it improperly secured?
Yes.
These are issues. These are questions.
Yes, because I've also been wondering why we've not moved past some of this. Okay, we still have the major, little issues like potholes on our roads. So if we have those problems, then imagine us having, tall barricades on our bridges. Imagine us not having safety or enforcing safety precautions on these lorries from, to secure, belting those containers on the lorry itself. So if this fell, then it means that it wasn't properly secured on the lorry or on the trailer.
And according to the videos and eyewitness accounts, the driver of the car, the vehicle carrying the container, wanted to prevent the bus from overtaking. It happened that the bus was trying to overtake, but the driver of a container vehicle now tried to block. So it wasn't trying to now go back to his own lane that the whole thing fell. But it still boils down to the fact that we are, I don't want to say we are an anyhow people, but it's looking like Nigerians generally, from government to ordinary people, it's just saddening.
I mean, you can always, you would always have people who want to be recalcitrant, but then measures have to be put in place and enforced on these people.
Yes.
And that's why we have, enforcers in the country.
Well, we pray that the souls of those who have died will rest in peace.
Amen.
The bottom strip of the paper, United Nations projects 3% growth for Nigeria. That's on page 42. 2 Nigerians arrested for 500,000 naira fraud in Canada. We've exported, of course, Nigerians, some unscrupulous Nigerians have exported their crime acts out of the country. I saw a video over the weekend, an elderly woman in her 80s, 800,000 naira wiped from a bank account, But then this one's happening in Canada, where the system is more efficient to detect these things and catch them.
So
and
if we try to get away with things like this in our home country, some countries will not take it. And so they'll continue to apprehend, Nigerians over there.
And in the aftermath of this story, and the story about the old woman whose money was wiped, some persons had began to say that some of these issues, particularly in Nigeria, happen with the collusion of bank officers. Someone shared a story and said there was a day he went to get his ATM card. Immediately he left the bank. His brother, who works in the bank, called him and told him that someone's going to call you and say they're calling from our bank, you want to check your ATM and all of that. And he said that it happened less than 30 minutes after the call. So sometimes these things happen because I don't see how an 80-year-old woman with no ATM card, her money is just wiped off after receiving a call.
Exactly.
You know, how do they get these details in the first place? You know,
just to show that several of our, of Nigerian sector, everything needs to be sanitized,
yes,
including the banking sector now.
Yes. Page 22 of the Punch newspaper this morning says Japa, that's immigration or migration or emigration, if you like. 2,000 doctors dumped Nigeria in 2022, says NARD, that's National Association of Resident Doctors, saying that 2,000 doctors, we are already under-doctored, as it were. And
well, this is what you get when you have a system that is not favorable to the medical personnel, and they would always leave in search of greener pastures. At least they would not want to, break their own work ethic by not striking or not going to work. Because even if they strike, they really can't strike full time. You still get them to be called for emergency situations at the hospital. But when you keep being blinded to the plight of your people, they leave. And then they leave the country, to you to manage and to, have it as you want to have it. But then, okay, like I had a doctor who said that their hazard allowance was moved after several years from 5,000. It was increased by just about 200 naira or 500 naira, I think. That's really bad. No, 5,000 naira hazard allowance, exactly.
Who are the frontline people when it comes to diseases and all of that? Very poor. It was part of the issues during COVID-19 era.
Of course, yes. So if in 2022 we had 2,000 doctors, just imagine if things don't get better, how many are going to leave? Yeah, exactly.
Well, above the nameplate, government appointments lopsided, lack merit, coming from former President Olusegun Obasanjo. That's on page 22 of the Punch newspaper. Court delivers judgment seeking 2023 post cancellation. As on page 30, you can read more about that story there on page 30 of the Punch newspaper. Ekweremadu in court Tuesday after 223-day detention. Page 18. Appeared like it was a joke when the news broke out, many months ago. But I must say that while people sympathize with him for his travels, the law has to be allowed to run its course. It doesn't matter if you are the president or a Senate president or a senator. Whatever is wrong is wrong. You can't call it any other name. So let the law take its course. Let him be tried. If he's found guilty, the appropriate sentence is issued. If he's found innocent, let it. But then it speaks to the fact that even in Nigeria here, we don't take something seriously. Allegations, I've seen people, government officials resign over allegations. They've not been proven guilty. But just because of the noise that the allegations are causing, they resign. But here we have a central bank governor who was in the news for the wrong reason and is still holding office. I mean, these are issues.
Proudly so.
Yes, proudly so. Meeting with the president. He was with the president yesterday.
Even jetting out with the president.
Listen, leave my Murphy baby alone. Also, Ekweremadu will be in court tomorrow. Let's see where that ends, if he will be granted bail again this time. My support was for Shibajo, not Tinubu, Najatu Mohammed. This woman has been in the news recently. She's been giving it hot to Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, after resigning from the PCC. She was the head of the Civil Society Organization Directorate of the APC's Presidential Campaign Council. But she left, citing some very, interesting reasons, especially the health of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. All right, so that's that on the Punch newspaper this morning.
All right, moving on quickly to the Nation newspaper. We have the banner headline says, Naira swap rule deepens. And the riders, reps rejects 10-day deadline extension. CBN to mop up 900 billion naira more from circulation. The more of that. No banks in 24 local governments. Cash scarcity persists at ATM points. POS operators record boom, hike charges. Expert faults short extension by Apex Bank. Well, I still have a problem with the reps having a problem with the 10-day deadline. Why are they rejecting 10-day deadline? Because you've been calling for an extension,
Yes.
and now an extension has been given. You're saying it is short, or it's not enough. Well, we know that there's been some sort of shortage in the circulation of the Naira notes, but let's see what 10 days can do, with the CBN, with the banks, and with the people now. The people also have some things to do. They have to take their old Naira notes to the banks now in exchange for the new Naira notes. So 10 days, can be a lot if we're all up and doing in our tasks.
Well, I agree with you, but again, the question is, do we have the notes going around? My problem with policies and extension, like we've said on the show, and like some of our analysts have said, we do first and think later. We do first and ask later. You test the waters and see how people will react to it, how people will take it, then you begin to adjust without first adjusting. I think it was Senator Shehu Sani who tweeted yesterday that there was someone in the hinterlands who did not even know that there's been any currency redesign. He doesn't know. And there are people like that, people who are in faraway communities. They are nomads. You understand? You get. So there are people who don't even know anything. They don't. Some of the market women who are rejecting the notes don't really even know what is happening. They just know that they've said we should not take new Naira notes, and then they are rejected.
But
so do we have the
notes? We need to also draw the attention of people to the fact that we had an analyst in the House, a national analyst, that said that the shortage in circulation might be, might be favorable to the economy in some way, to force the hands of people to have a lot of e-banking. You get, instead of doing a lot of cash transactions, that is going to help the economy, and then to stop people from using the money to do a lot of unscrupulous things.
All right, so let me ask you, when was the last time you made a bank transaction on your phone and it went immediately? You did it
today, this morning.
You sent it and the person got it immediately?
Yes.
Fine. The last time I did that was weeks ago. I almost washed plates at a popular restaurant.
Of course,
no,
I also had some people having experience of that over the weekend. But it also goes to show that the banks have been overburdened lately because of the new Naira notes. And we even talked about machines, getting faulty because of all of these things. They've been overworked. So we just need to, the tension will die down in a bit. But we all need, to make adjustments. We all want change, but we need to make some adjustments.
And then people need to be more honest. We always like to take advantage of each other in this part of the world. I mean, because some of our guys, we were discussing about it at the office yesterday, and some persons had to pay as high as 100 naira per 1,000 that they were drawing. So if you were withdrawing 5,000 naira for 100 naira before, you now have to pay 500 naira because it's new notes. There are people buying 10,000 naira for 6,000 naira.
It is here also in the news here. Yes. It says POS operators record boom charges.
Yes, that as high as 2,000 naira. It's unfair. Because while you're doing that to normal people, there are some persons who are at parties spraying the new notes.
Same new note. Yes.
How? The 200 naira note, I've not seen it. I've seen 500 naira. I've seen 1,000. But I saw videos of people spraying 200 naira notes, bundles. May God help us if we're still within his radar of help.
Amen. All right, just below the newspaper at the bottom strip, 2 kids among 9 killed as container falls on commercial bus in Lagos. That's still on that gruesome story about the crash in Lagos. And Gbajabiamila wants container trucks barred from Ojuelegba Bridge, and I quite agree with that.
Not just Ojuelegba Bridge. Let him find a way of moving themselves
Yes, away from
at another
marriages.
time.
Exactly,
Yes.
and at another time as well. Yes, the bottom strip. Adeleke puts University of Elisha on hold. More of that news is on page 27, and 5 Cameroonians held for kidnapping. That's also on page 6. I like the fact that another nationality, people of other nationality have been held for kidnapping in Nigeria.
Well, it speaks to the porosity of our borders. Yes. I saw the border that Nigeria has with Niger Republic, one of the borders, and it's just it's a compound. You just walk through, and then you cross. You don't even know you've crossed into Niger until you're told, oh, you're now in Niger, so you have to behave this way. Some of those borders are not policed.
Yes.
They are not properly managed, and so some unscrupulous elements. Our African brothers and sisters are people of integrity, but some of them come into the country to perpetrate crimes. At some time in 2021 or thereabout, some Ambazonian separatists from Cameroon entered into Taraba at some point, to perpetrate crime. That was an insult, a slap on Nigeria's territorial sovereignty. So you can't rule out some of these people, but it's good that they're being apprehended and made to face the music.
Yes, so and our security needs to be worked on, really, for ourselves, and to curb all the people from coming in to hurt us that much. All right, just below the nameplate, Buhari unmoved by PDP's abuses, says Tinubu. Nnamani, I dumped Atiku for Tinubu because PDP reneged on zoning.
Well, Senator Nnamani is part of those who were suspended by the PDP last week over anti-party affairs activities. I don't expect Buhari to be moved by the PDP's abuses. He's not on the ballot. He has said several times that once he finishes his term, he just wants to retire to his farm. So the man is a. I don't want to use nonchalant, but he strikes me as someone who does not just care about what you have to say or what you have to do. He just wants to do his bit and leave, and go and enjoy life. And but I'm concerned about what Senator Nnamani is saying. If we want a better Nigeria, it begins with the individual. It begins with the institutions. It begins with the political parties. If you have an agreement on zoning, you should follow through. You should not circumvent that process to massage one person's ego.
Exactly.
So that's why I understand Wiki's anger. By the way, their deadline expires tomorrow. They're here to announce who their presidential candidate is.
Right. And so Nnamani now has been, removed from the PDP. He's no more in the PDP, and he has openly said he has dumped Atiku for Tinubu. All right, just beside that story, petrol now 550 naira in cities. Scarcity bites harder, may linger. I mean, we don't want this to linger. We want, an emergency relief somehow, because we've been talking about this back and forth since last year, since November thereabouts. And this is January, it is the end of January, as a matter of fact. And we still have long queues. We have people, boycotting this the conventional way of getting fuel, now getting from black markets. So. And
it is bothersome, worrisome too, that people, it's the same thing with the Naira. People have enough fuel to hawk on the street. Petrol stations do not have fuel to sell. How?
Well, okay, there are some people, I don't know some cases, but there are some cases of people who stay close to this, filling stations. As soon as they know that, or they get wind of the petrol stations selling fuel, they get their kegs in numbers and they store in the houses or wherever it is they want to store.
Which is a fire hazard.
Exactly. That's another security issue. We just keep compiling Nigerians' problems, and we think we just want them to, go away at a wave of our fingers. But somehow the nation is just in a big trouble just before the elections, and it still goes to show how the election is going to go peacefully. with all of this. But then we'll wait to see what the government will do in the coming days. All right, just below that story, APC accuses PDP of planning campaign of calumny against its candidate.
Well, that's not surprising. It's back and forth between the parties.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
We'll always have that with all the, especially the parties on the ballot this year. All right, Ajaero set to replace Waba as NLC president. Union confab for February 7. And more of that story is on page 8. Pension funds rise to 15 trillion naira. Investments return is 13%. You know, this is baffling to me how pension funds seem to be having interest or rising to 15 billion naira.
Well, it shows that a lot of persons are participating in the pension contribution pension scheme and your other different schemes around pension, and so the money is increasing. What I have issues with actually is that despite these figures being thrown around, there are people, old people, who protest every now and then because they can't get their
because I was
pensions.
going to get there. If it is rising, why are people not getting paid? Why are people still crying that they're not being paid their pension? This is really terrible.
Very terrible. Bad news, if you ask me.
Very terrible. 11 burnt to death in Ondo Road accident. 3 policemen killed at checkpoint. Now, this is a case of hunters being hunted themselves now because of insecurity issues. That's the policeman.
And we do hope that, because we've always said it, my problem, my issue, my position on most of these issues is that if the people who should be defending are being attacked, what happens to those who should be defended? You know, so insecurity affects everyone. Every person is affected. I mean, it wasn't long ago that President Buhari's the brigade of the army that guards the president was attacked. You know, so if that could happen, if Atiku could be attacked, if you know, people who have many of the security men at their disposal, they could be attacked. Imagine what happens to the farmers in Borno, the tea farmers in Benue, and all of that. But I do hope that the government can get a grip on it.
Yes. All right, that's all on the Nation newspaper this morning.
We'll move on to the Daily Trust newspaper. The Daily Trust newspaper has a different banner headline. Always has a different banner headline from other papers. It says, federal government under pressure to probe herders' killings in Nasarawa. MACBAN says it's war crime, blames autumn. NBA, NHRC seek compensation for victims' families. My hands are clean, says Benue Governor. ACF, NCM demand investigation on page 4. That's the story we're talking about last week.
Yes.
You know, that's a particular newspaper wrote as a bomb blast. It wasn't a bomb blast. It was the Nigerian Air Force mistakenly bombing a farm settlement or community and killing lots of persons there. And there's been some back and forth between the Benue State Governor and MACBAN, you know, because Samuel Ortom has always spoken vehemently for a very strong hand against terrorists. But then if you want to kill terrorists, it's fine. These are people who kill others innocently, so they deserve it. But I don't know how it works in the Air Force. I'm not a trained security personnel, but I've read about precision bombings. I've read about intelligence reports. So why would you mistake farmers' herders for terrorists? And now the federal government has to be under pressure to investigate.
I mean, their settlements could not be the same. It has to be different. So you could have mapped out that region.
Exactly.
Or even warned these people to move or to leave, that something is about to be done. But then, it goes to show.
And it's not the first time, if you remember. There have been cases of
course,
mistaken bombings and all of that. I would just hope that the NAF sanitizes its system itself, and you can't put it past some persons being overzealous, some persons not knowing the job. But then some of these things should not be happening. People should not be dying this way. It's enough that terrorists and bandits have been killing our people, we should not be killing our own people.
Yes.
Now, below that story, brain drain. Nigeria may end up without doctors, says NARD. We already talked about that story on the Punch. 2,000 doctors leaving the country last year. Plateau governorship peace pact. CP storms out of venue. Oh, I like to read that story, but it's on page 10 of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Politicians can be frustrating, I tell you. So you may want to understand why the commissioner of police stormed out.
Yes, in frustration.
It's still not something that he should do. You know, if they are frustrating you, you are the enforcer, you are the law enforcer there. You should make them see that you are there to enforce the law for them. Well, federal government cautions against phone applications, pledges data privacy. Yes, the NCC has been giving us a lot of warnings recently, and saying that knowing which applications to download and which ones not to download. So
a lot
we should be cautious too. Yes. Mixed reactions as CBN extends Naira deadline to February 17th. 1.9 trillion Naira mopped up. Reps reject extension. Vow to sign arrest warrant against Emefiele. Please.
Yes.
It's been some really strong back and forth, you know, between Murphy and the members of the National Assembly. And it will be interesting to see if they would actually sign that warrant.
Yes, they've been making a lot of threats that they want Emefiele arrested because he still hasn't showed up from all the invitations sent to him.
Okay, so very quickly, above the banner headline but below the nameplate, 20 killed in Lagos Ondo road crashes, 11 burnt to death in Ondo, 9 crushed to death in Lagos. I mean, for people who work in the media, sometimes when these figures are read, it looks like, okay, it's just some other figures. But when you get back home and you sit down thinking 20 people, just like that, that's 20 families thrown into pain.
I think more than 20 families,
more
but
than
20 families, you know, directly.
Primarily, yes.
Exactly.
Wow. God help us. Now, page 17, get us 2 bikes, foodstuff. Kidnappers of Kaduna villagers tell relatives. If this were not a very serious issue, I would have been tempted to laugh. You know, but sometime last year too, kidnappers were demanding condiments from families of kidnapped victims. Condiments. That's how bad, that's how trivial these people take lives for. You would kidnap someone and you're asking for foodstuff in return. That's really, really terrible. You can't even blame that on poverty now. You just blame it on wickedness. I mean, it's outright wickedness. And after controversy, Buhari visits Kano to commission 8 project. The controversy there was the Kano State Governor, Umaru Abdullahi Ganduje, writing to Buhari, asking him to postpone his trip for security reasons. I mean,
the president had been threatened, you know, directly by some persons in court. But then, if the people, you haven't been telling your people, or how would I put it now? You haven't been writing to the people about, you know, security and all that, about threat to their lives every day. But now the president is about coming. You're telling him to stay off because of security issues. So what about people who stay in that area on a daily basis?
Well, those are the questions we ask. Remember that on Spring Trend sometime last week.
Yes.
In Katsina, we saw that letter that came out from Katsina. About 500 million naira was budgeted for the visit of the president. 2-day visit, 27th and 28th, thereabout. 500 million naira was budgeted. So you can understand that these people, you shouldn't understand, but you can know why they're giving priority to the president at the expense of the ordinary people. I just wonder what 500 million naira could do in terms of social infrastructure.
Yes, for the people of the state. But then we've been seeing a lot of these types of stories in the news. I mean, lately, we've seen that of Lagos, how the seaport was, you know, shut down.
Yes, they lost about 70 million.
Exactly, was in town. We've heard of, you know, something similar but not the same in Kogi, where, you know, the president was coming and
the king yes,
was
still
not
that back and
exactly.
forth, yes.
So we've been having a lot of this. Is it, you know, some sort of eye service or some sort of, I don't know.
I think it should be the eye service. Because if you're willing, in the case of Kogi now, if you're willing to ridicule a monarch or a first-class monarch for something that you could have settled over the phone or even just visited each other to settle it, it shows that you just want to be seen. You just want to be seen. That's unheard, yes. Well, still in captivity, we must remind you, 11 schoolgirls of the Federal Government College, Federal Girls College, Benin Yauri, 594 days. These are not just numbers, they are people, schoolgirls. And one student of Bethel Baptist High School, Kujama, 566 days. Please, government, do well to rescue these children and return them to their families. Yeah, but that's all on the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. I think we still have one paper.
Moving on quickly to The Guardian, we're just going to brush through The Guardian. New Naira notes, full crisis compound Nigeria's woes. That's the banner headline. And the number of riders there says, old banknotes withdrawal extended to February 17, faces legal test. Reps reject CBN's extension, insists on Emefiele's arrest if he fails to show up. Currency swap deadline puts 100 trillion naira national output at risk, says CPPE. Emefiele, banks rake in 2.4 trillion naira currency outside system down to 25%. Youths call off planned protest at CBN headquarters. CBN to monitor sanctioned banks holding new naira notes. Security consultant calls for presidential task force against saboteurs. Well, I'm interested in this youths calling off planned protest at CBN. Obviously, they were to protest, but then I think the extension, as you know, states their hand on the protest now.
Well, I did see it coming. There's no way it would not have happened. The deadline originally was to be tomorrow. And as of today, I can tell you for free that if you go to any ATM, you'll be paid
some old
majority of old notes. And that means that the banks don't have them. The banks, some of them have, but are hoarding and are selling black market.
I want us to really look into that.
Yes,
because we keep talking about CBN not rolling out this new notes. But then the CBN is saying
that it has given out enough and the banks. Well, the question now is, even in Lagos, even in Abuja, it's the same story. So what happens in Kano? Remember in Yobe, was in Yobe last week, about 4 out of 14 or thereabout local government councils have banks. How do you get the Naira note across to people in that place? Even here in Osun State, people in Ire, in Igbajo, in Okuku, how do they get the notes? Because there are no banks there that are functional. So that means they have to rely on POS operators who have now hiked their own prices.
Or take the transportation that is
Close
now
to 3,000
expensive to come and get the new notes in the cities. But then let's leave the CBN to monitor, as they said, and sanction banks holding new Naira notes. And he even said that even some members of staff of the CBN as well, who have been found to be dealing in things like this, would also, be sanctioned. So let's watch and see what happens. All right, just below the nameplates, 20 die in Lagos or a road accidents. We've been having that sad story on all the papers this morning. You're killing Nigerians in installments, Labour leader tells Buhari. That's more of that news is on page 5. Gunmen kill 5 security operatives along Enugu-Abakaliki highway.
I am worried about the number of security men who have been killed in eastern Nigeria. I really don't understand. You cannot self-sabotage and expect progress. You already have your the part of the country on lockdowns every Monday. You assault people who don't comply. Sometimes lives are lost. And now you're just burning INEC offices, killing security. Who are the gunmen that are unknown? Why is it so hard to nip them in the bud? How do they get weapons? Where do they get money to finance their crimes? These are questions.
A lot of unanswered questions there. All right, just below the newspaper, the bottom strip, Ayade yet to implement teachers' promotion since 2015. PDP Guber candidates alleges. Buhari jettisons Ganduje security alert, visits Kano today. Now, this allegation by the PDP Guber candidate of Ayade yet to implement teachers' promotion since 2015. Now, imagine somebody staying on a level for 8 years straight. That's sad, really, really sad. So, if this is true, the question is why.
Well, only Professor Ben Ayade can answer that question, you know. But then you can't put it past politicians to be funny. They do their best to be. I think that they try actually to be funny because 8 years is a long time to process someone's promotion. It's the same thing that happened, I think, here in Osun State. You know, it took a particular governor many years to start promoting people, many years to start appointing permanent secretaries. These are things you could have easily done. These are things that you could have.
First few years in office, but then we still have these very trivial issues in Nigeria, and we think that the more complicated issues would go away.
Yes.
We need to start from places like this. And so that brings us to the end of
the paper. Yes. I was saying earlier that like that last story on The Guardian, Buhari jettisons Ganduje's security alert, visits Kano today. I did say earlier that President Muhammadu Buhari happens to be someone who he's just so confident. It's just so he doesn't really care, what you say. So he will be visiting Kano today, regardless of what Ganduje has to say, because obviously he has all the security. I mean, he's the president. I saw a video.
So even means diverting all the budget to more security for the president.
Yes, I saw a video of him in Katsina and the security bubble around him. It's just... Anyway, well, that's where we leave it on the papers this morning. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll be bringing on our guests to talk about the recent happening in Osun State, the governorship petition tribunal striking out the victory of Governor Ademola Adeleke and declaring former Governor Adegboyega Oyetola as winner of that election that took place in July 16th, 2022. There's been a couple of reactions, including protest and some disruption of vehicular movement on Saturday. When we come back from the break, we'll bring you more on that conversation.
Stay with us.
Arrested, affected, sound, found. What do we see? What do we say? Flowing from a spring. A fact A to Z. Check and confirm. Ever is pounding current events. Traveling down from the business gist to the globally arising happenings, to the sports news, to the bittersweet infos. Guided transmission, even diffusion, vast and fast, detailed facts are fled. Within seconds, nuggets of words that flew across borders are fired. Stories short and long, wrapped in bundles of words, broken and dissected as it is, except misheard. This is the news as it is.
According to the words of Michael Forbes, one who never asks questions either knows everything or nothing. Watch me as I ask the questions you think no one wants to answer. Even questions it appears no one has got the guts to ask. My name is Femi Adefila and I've got the gut. Let's ask the pertinent questions and watch as we get answers.
Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela was an anti-apartheid activist
who gave his all for the elimination of what has been described as the world's most vicious rule of the unjust and man's inhumanity against man. He was born July 18, 1918 in Mvezo, South Africa. Educated and trained as a successful legal practitioner, he took up the gauntlet of a human activist against segregation by the minority white suprematists in South Africa. At the climax of his trial for treason, orchestrated by the minority South African government, the great crusader for democratic equality was prepared to pay the supreme sacrifice to establish majority rule in his native land. He told white jurists that if achieving freedom for his people was worth his life, he was prepared to die. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island, described as the most notorious prison in the world. It was from this same prison that he came out as a free man to assume office as South Africa's first black president in 1994. Western Spring Television identifies Nelson Mandela as a watershed character in history.
Sports is a culture on its own. It has its own language, its own people, with their own way of life. The world of sports is never void of actions, stories, dramas, and scandals. I guess you need a sports show that can walk the walk and talk the talk.
On this show, we answer all your sporting questions. The whens, the whys, the wheres, and even the what ifs. Sports Spring is that show that will give you that new lease of life you've been looking for in sport journalism. Join me, Joseph Atewa,
And your sports amateur.
All right, it's the morning after the tribunal judgment here in Osun State. Before we go into the discussion for today, I'd like to tell you and show you how that particular incident went. Do take a listen to this report. After the All Progressives Congress APC and its candidate in the July 16, 2022 governorship election, Adegboyega Oyetola, challenged the result of that election, the Election Petition Tribunal today delivered its judgment. The petitioners challenged the declaration on 3 grounds, namely the alleged forgery of certificates and non-qualification of the second respondent, Governor Ademola Adeleke, alleged overvoting in 749 polling units, as well as non-compliance with the Electoral Act by the first respondent, the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC). While delivering the majority judgment of the panel, its chair, Justice Tetsi Kume, resolved the first ground of the petition in favor of the second respondent, ruling that by providing other qualifying documents, he is exonerated from forgery or non-qualification. However, the tribunal, in its ruling on the second and third grounds, held that the petitioners were able to prove their allegations of infractions in the polling units. Ruling further, Justice Kume said the tribunal, having found proof of overvoting, held that the election was conducted in non-compliance with the Electoral Act. Citing relevant authorities, he dismissed the defense of the respondent as erroneous and held that actions of INEC amount to tampering with official records by producing different results. Consequently, the tribunal ruled that the second respondent, Governor Adeleke, did not score the lawful amount of votes required to emerge governor. It then held that the announcement of the incumbent governor as winner is declared null and void. After deducting the invalid vote from the affected polling units, Justice Kume ruled that Mr. Oyetola scored a total of 314,931 votes, while Governor Adeleke secured 290,666 votes. Speaking outside the court, counsel to the petitioner, Sakala Yonu, said his team was satisfied with the ruling and described it as a true reflection of justice and fairness.
Before you ask your question, I will repeat in summary what I said inside. All praises to Almighty Allah for seeing us through. He is the one that brings success or otherwise. We thank him for the journey so far. And I also want to mention that our leaders on our team who are not here today, Prince Elo Fagbemi SAS and Chief Akin Olujimi SA. We also thank them for the able leadership that they have given to the APC Oyetola legal team. Thank you. And we thank all our colleagues too, the soldiers, the legal soldiers, the ones that are the outer bar, who did a lot of the sleepless nights of work that they have done. We recognize them and we thank all of them as well.
On the other hand, counsel to the third respondent, People's Democratic Party (PDP), Nathaniel Oke, rejected the majority judgment of the tribunal, adding that his party aligned perfectly with the position of the minority judgment.
The minority judgment it may not really be the judgment of the court, but we are in total agreement with the position of the minority judgment as delivered. But you will recall that it's only two people that deliver judgment in respect of this matter. The reality on ground is that we are dissatisfied, and the necessary legal steps for the purpose of challenging that judgment, we will embark upon it.
Counsel to the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC), Professor Paul Ananaba, also expressed dissatisfaction with the judgment and said the body would study it before taking its next line of action.
The tribunal has the majority, well, one of the judges of the tribunal, the chairman, delivered what appears to be a majority judgment. The second member of the panel delivered a dissenting judgment. The third member thanked everybody, but did not read any judgment. These are issues we will have to get back to the commission, and then we'll take appropriate decision. But anybody who listened to the judgment, even before the CTC is out, will see the industry and the position of the law on beavers, which is the primary thing, that the minority position that beavers is the primary source of what transpired on the day of election, as stated by the minority judgment, is the correct position of the law as far as we are concerned. And there is no way a report issued after will be the primary source of information of what transpired on the day of election, and based on which the results were declared and the election was concluded. So Nigerians, people from Osun, should be calm. There are constitutional provisions on what should be done. I have a belief that the Court of Appeal has a duty here.
As part of its ruling, the tribunal also ordered the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) to withdraw the certificate of return issued to Governor Adeleke and return former Governor Oyetola as winner of the election, having won the lawful amount of majority votes. However, after the majority judgment, a minority judgment read by a member of the panel, Rabiu Bashir, argued that the petitioners failed woefully in proving the allegations of overvoting. It held that the bimodal voters accreditation system (BVAS) remains the primary source of data for the election. According to the minority judgment, the second and third grounds of the petition were resolved in favor of the respondent. Emmanuel Ujadigele, Western Spring Television News. Okay, so that was a summary of what happened in court on Friday. Former Governor Gboyega Oyetola has responded to that, but we'll come to him later in the course of the show. We're now joined live on the show by a legal practitioner, Mr. Akami Ajibola, who joins us live via Zoom. Good morning, Mr. Ajibola.
Good morning.
Well, we hope that we have him join us in the course of the show to talk about what happened in court on Friday. All right, good morning once again, Mr. Akami Ajibola. Thank you for joining us on the show.
This is not Akami Ajibola.
Oh, okay. Oh, Dr. Misbah Lateef.
Yes.
All right, sir. Thank you so much. Sorry about the mix-up. Thank you for joining us this morning on the show from the United Kingdom.
Good morning.
All right, so quickly, let's go down to the business of the day now. What do you make of the judgment of the tribunal on Friday?
Excuse me. Good morning to you and your colleague in the studio, and then good morning, Nigerians. The judgment, of course, I understand came, with surprise to many, but personally, it did not actually come to me as a surprise. It did not come to me as a surprise because sometime around August 2020, when I had an opportunity to read the processes filed in the case, the petition of the petitioner, and then the processes of the respondents, I came to a conclusion at that time where I said, and as a matter of legal analysis, that the petition was unassailable. But that is personally about me. I understand also why it came maybe as a surprise to many. Many did not quite pay attention to the case that was ongoing in Osun. And I think the reason for that was that there was this picture or idea of the beavers presented by INEC to the public, which makes the beavers look, like an inviolable or something that is above board. So many did not actually think anything was going to come out of that petition because they thought this technology, was above human manipulation. But as we have seen since Friday, I think the case has since generated, or the judgment rather, a lot of controversies because people, as I said, did not pay attention, and then the focus naturally now is on Osun. Now, the takeaway from that for me is this. One, it is a good development for democracy because it gives us an opportunity ahead of February 2023, the major election, for INEC to go back to the drawing board and then address the challenges that may be associated with the use of the beavers. So that is a good one. And in another sense, it is also a portends danger because, as I said earlier, the idea of beavers that we had, or what the INEC presented to the public, was something that was not capable of being manipulated or of being, manipulated by human factor. But as we have seen from the Osun's judgment, and particularly from the judgment of the majority, we saw how, unscrupulous politicians, can collide with all sense of modesty, also dubious electoral official, because the tribunal specifically hold, in some respects, that the INEC actually compromise with official document, or they tamper with official document. So the question is that, who are the people, who are actually responsible for that? So basically for me, I think the judgment is a good development because it gives us opportunity to reassess the electoral process before a major election so that we can address whatever teething problem might be associated with the process so that we don't, get to the main election and then allow something to snowball into a violence of, unimaginable magnitude. So for me, really, as I said, I think it was quite obvious that INEC as an umpire did not come to that proceeding, I would say, with clean hand or with decency. And I say this because, as you may have observed, INEC actually ended up issuing multiple beavers reports over the same results. So the question is that if truly ICT was deployed, and if you were to believe that the ICT technology was above board, as INEC has made it appear up till this morning, then how exactly did that happen? How was it possible that some people actually were able to vote without being accredited by the beavers? Because as the tribunal has found, some people may have literally bypassed the beavers, and yet they may have also been allowed to vote, which is contrary to the provision of Section 47 of the Electoral Act 2022, which makes the use of the BVAS mandatory, for accreditation of voters, and meaning that there cannot be a valid vote without going through the process of accreditation via the BVAS. So these are the issues, and I think they are quite, if you ask me, enormous, from what happened in Osun on Friday, and I hope the INEC will seize this opportunity, to address to these challenges before the major election ahead of us. So as I said, in summary, the judgment did not come to me as a surprise. I understand as a matter of law that where an umpire, issued multiple and conflicting documents in the manner that INEC has done, the court will most likely settle for the document that is least controversial. And that document in this case, if you ask me, will be a document, the first BVAS that was issued by INEC before issues were joined at all at the tribunal, before parties, approach the court to to present their cases. But any other subsequent document issue while the proceeding was pending, as a matter of legal authority, usually will be viewed with suspicions, because they will be seen to be document procured deliberately to overreach the other party. And, in a simple layman sense, what really happened was that INEC gave, BVAS reports to one party before they filed their petition. That party went back to work. They prepared their petition after they have examined the BVAS. They served their petition on INEC. At that time, INEC as a party had access to the complaint. And it was then almost a month after they had initially issued a BVAS to the party who approached them first. INEC then issued to herself another BVAS. If we subject this to common sense, it stands to reason that anyone will easily suspect that something may have gone amiss. But INEC did not stop there. They went ahead to also issue another third BVAS report, which another party in the case presented. So these are the kind of controversies and conflicting documents that were generated by the same institution and over the same election. So the tribunal had no choice, the majority in this case, as I said earlier, but to settle for the least controversial and I guess also the most credible of all these conflicting documents, because it is the duty of the court at any rate to decide the case one way or the other. The court cannot be seen to throw its hands into the air helplessly. So this is basically, my thoughts generally on this, as it were.
Let's look at the meat of the matter now. Let's look at the issues surrounding the judgment in the first place. On the first count, which is the issue of forgery and presentation of fake documents, the tribunal ruled that forgery was proved, but that the presentation of other qualifying documents by the second respondent now exonerated him. When it gets to cross-appeal stage or at the appeal stage, can this forgery issue be made a major point of cross-appeal, seeing as the tribunal already held that forgery was indeed proved?
Yes, I think one of the interesting things that came out of that judgment on Friday was also what I can call a somersault by the majority. But before I say more on that, let me clarify that first, all the three judges, including the one who issued the dissecting judgment, agree that the PDP candidate actually was qualified to contest in that election. Now, having heard so, the three of them, they then went ahead, the three of them again, to say that there was indeed an issue of forgery, that the claim of forgery, was clearly established. Then the question again is that the issue of forgery under the relevant law actually goes to the issue of I would say, qualification. But one of the requirements is that if a candidate presents a forged document, that is one of the ground and constitutional ground to disqualify a candidate. So the tribunal in one breath held that the candidate was qualified. And then in another breath, which is a somersault, in my humble opinion, held that there was a forgery. So of course, like you have rightly observed, this would be an interesting thing. I suspect the respondents at the Court of Appeal, that is the APC now, we definitely want to pursue. If we want the Court of Appeal to look at that, I would say somersault or a contradiction, and then that may well also be another ground, to sustain their judgments they got before the tribunal. So if, for example, the Court of Appeal agreed that, well, once the issue of forgery has been established, then the candidate ought to have been disqualified, then that would have been, or that would have clearly settled the whole case. But like I said, these are issues, for the Court of Appeal to look into. And I can tell you that these are very, very important issues that we ordinarily, be set before their courts. Because the tribunal, the majority now, or all of them, as the case is, actually, in my humble opinion, are somersaulted at that point. And in fairness to them, the reason they gave for the somersault, of course, the somersault is my own word now, was that they said, although forgery had been established, there were other certificates, or I would say educational qualification, which can sustain his, I would say, qualification to contest the election. So the question is that you cannot blow hot and cold at the same time. It is either a candidate does not submit any forged document and therefore is qualified if he has met other requirements, or you find a candidate to have forged a document, and that forgery alone, is so substantial in law to, I would say, affect all other whatever qualification a candidate may have, obtained. Because the point is that you are disqualified the moment you are found to have presented any forged document at any level. It could even be a forged document about age. So it doesn't really have to be education. The point is, a candidate is not allowed by law to present any forged document at any instance. So how the tribunal therefore ended up, distinguishing between forgery on one hand and then certificate on the other hand, is for me something the Court of Appeal will be interested also in looking at.
Okay, so before we begin to prepare to let you go now, let's look at the other aspects of the tribunal judgment. What do you make of the minority judgment not agreeing with the majority? Justice Ogbuli, who read the minority judgment, held in some areas that he does not agree with the majority in terms of the issue of BVAS. Saying that the exhibits tendered by the petitioner, he basically said that the petitioner failed woefully, I'm using his words now, failed woefully to prove the case of overvoting. That is contrary to the majority judgment. What do you make of that?
Okay, thank you. I've read the minority judgment, and with due respect to my Lord, I think that judgment, with due respect again, does not really, it's an 8-page document where my Lord, with due respect, did not really go into any, I would say, in-depth analysis of law or even evidence. And this is where I think it doesn't really hold much, for the appellants here, those who are proceeding on appeal now. And if you want us to draw a parallel between this and what happened in 2018, you will recall that the minority judgment in 2018 actually turned out to be, the one, according to experts, the most reasoned and the most, I would say, comprehensive judgment. But in the case of minority judgment in this particular case, my Lord did not go so much into depth or deep analysis of anything. And as a matter of fact, my Lord actually agreed with the majority to a very large extent. If you look at the opening of that marriage judgment, it says he concurs with everything the majority have done with respect to interlocutory application and other things. But then my Lord went ahead to now do what I can call simplistic analysis of things. So what the majority have done, on the contrary, is to say that yes, we agree there are other BVAS report or whatever, but as a matter of law, we think the first one has more probative value or is credible. But minority judgment simply says that, well, the subsequent BVAS report, particularly the one generated from the BVAS machine, so this is the area of conflict between the judgment, but I think the minority judgment does not really hold much, to be honest, for the appellant in this case, because there is really not much, with due respect, to that minority judgment. I mean, if you just go through it, you will see easily that, there was really no any, in-depth analysis of, with due respect, anything. It's just some superficial analysis or view of things, if you ask me. So I think we have interesting days ahead at the Court of Appeal, which, obviously has 60 days, to look at that matter before it may then proceed to the Supreme Court.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time this morning on the show, Dr. Misbah Lateef, who joined us live from the United Kingdom, live via Zoom. Thank you for your analysis of Friday's event here in Osun State. Do have for yourself the wonderful week. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Good morning, and thank you too.
All right, so that's the first leg of the interview. We'll take this break now. We'll bring you the second guest, who would also, be answering some questions around the tribunal judgment that was issued on Friday. So stay with us.
Ìlú Abẹ́òkúta, gẹ́gẹ́ bí orúkọ rẹ̀, ìlú tí a tẹ̀dó sábẹ́ Olúmọ. Ó jẹ́ ibùgbé àwọn ẹ̀yà Ẹ̀gbá àti Òwu tó jìjàǹgbara lọ́wọ́ Aláàfin Ọ̀yọ́ àtijọ́. Láàrin ọdún 1775 sí 1780 ni akọni Lísàbí Àgbòǹgbò Àkàlà léwájú wọn láti dáwọ́ sísan ìṣákọ́lẹ̀ fún Aláàfin dúró. Ìdí nìyí tí àwọn ọmọ Abẹ́òkúta ṣe ń pe ara wọn ní ọmọ Ẹ̀gbá mọ Lísàbí Àgbòǹgbò Àkàlà. Ìlú Abẹ́òkúta jẹ́ ìlú àwọn ọ̀làjú àti aláfẹ́. Ọ̀pọ̀ àwọn òyìnbó aláwọ̀ funfun ló fi bẹ̀ ṣe ìlú, pàápàá lásìkò ìjọba amúnisìn. Ṣọ́ọ̀ṣì àkọ́kọ́ nílẹ̀ Nàìjíríà ní St. Peters tó wà ní Aké. Ilé ìwòsàn àkọ́kọ́ nílẹ̀ Nàìjíríà Sacred Heart Hospital ìlú Abẹ́òkúta ló wà. Aláké lorúkọ oyè ọba ìlú Ẹ̀gbá. Bẹ́ẹ̀ sì ni Òkè Olúmọ wà níbùdó tó tẹ́jú láti lè fi rí gbogbo ìlú Abẹ́òkúta ní orí òkè náà. Àwọn ọ̀jọ̀gbọ́n àti onímọ̀ púpọ̀ ló jẹ́ ọmọ bíbí ìlú Abẹ́òkúta. Àwọn bíi ọ̀jọ̀gbọ́n Wọlé Ṣóyínká, ọ̀jìnmí akọni obìnrin ní Fúnmiláyọ̀ Ransom Kuti àtọ̀pọ̀ àwọn míì. Iṣẹ́ àgbẹ̀ àti àdìrẹ níṣẹ́ tó gbayì nílùú Abẹ́òkúta. Ẹ̀gbá mọ Lísàbí.
Sports is a culture on its own.
All right, thank you so much for staying with us on the show Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. If you're just joining the conversation, we've been bringing to you our interview segment on last week's incidents, last week's occurrence in Osun State, the tribunal, election petition tribunal sitting in Osogbo, the Osun State capital, after about 6 months of hearing the petition filed by the All Progressives Congress APC and former Governor Adegboyega Oyetola, challenging the declaration of Governor Ademola Adeleke as winner of the July 16th, 2022 election, struck out that victory of Governor Adeleke. We're now joined live by another legal practitioner, Barrister Kami Ajibola, on the show this morning on the phone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Okay, so I'll ask you, what do you make of that judgment, particularly seeing as the three justices, Justice Tetsy Kume, who is the chair of the tribunal, Justice Obuli, and of course Rabi Bashir, did not agree. There was no sort of agreement on two of the other issues, two of the other grounds, except on the first ground, which was the issue of educational qualification. What do you make of that?
Before going into what I make of that, let us briefly go to what can be classified as the foundation of the purported lead judgment. At the conclusion of that lead judgment, the chairman that read the lead judgment included in his judgment go lo Bugawon, referring to the governor. So when I read through that slogan, I caught 5 professors of law from 5 different universities. And the 5 of them came up with one conclusion, that judgment is laced with bias and malice. So the computation of the entire few and holdings of the lead judgment borders and funded on malice and bias. And where you see a judgment that is funded on bias and malice, justice will be wanting. That is exactly what happened in that case. And we need to be very, very careful, particularly in Osun State, because some strange things have been springing up from Osun State now in the last 12, 14 years. For instance, in the era of Aregbesola, one way or the other, forced his way to fear fake police report. And it was because of Osun State that the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria was amended. Because everybody, every right-thinking member of the society then knew that there was no justice done. And for that reason, they amended the Constitution to make the Supreme Court the final destination of any governorship election petition. So, in what we are having in the just delivered so-called lead judgment, it is a legal charade that has abandoned all the known principles of law, particularly leaving aside the real judgment which acts admissibility prowess for documents and for other evidence that does not have that characteristics. So it's a wrong portent for our judiciary.
Barrister Ajibola, well, the tribunal held that the B-verse was not, in accordance with the Electoral Act as amended, and that was why his certificate of return was retracted, or he was sacked as governor. So what do you say to that?
That expression is a misconceived position of law. That is not the import of Section 47 of Electoral Act 2022. It is a pure misconception of that law. The issue is, when you want to prove overvoting, as laws are today, there are 2 things in issue which are very, very basic to the proof of overvoting. Number 1, the BVAS itself, the existence of BVAS itself, then the existence of voters register. And in the just concluded election, I voted, when we got to the polling unit, the printed register, voters registers was taken out. Our names were located and fixed there. Then after starting from that process, we now went to BVAS accreditation as well. There were 2 accreditations with 2 items. So, and if you want to prove overvoting, the 2 items must be brought to the attention of the court, and it must be admitted before the court to enable court to assess whether there was actual overvoting or not. And BVAS were brought to the tribunal. It was admitted, and the reading of the BVAS did not establish any overvoting. And on that BVAS as well, the court gave an order that a physical inspection should be conducted, and a physical inspection was conducted, and a report was written in consonance with the figures we have on the BVAS used. The BVAS is not establishing any overputting. The physical inspection made on BVAS and other used items are not establishing overputtings. And all these are in the evidence before the tribunal. So the decision of the lead judgment is very, very strange to law. It is a law if a judicial officer should give a judgment which is in consonance with the patent and stipulation of the law regards such judgment as kangaroo judgments. So the lead judgment is against the known law in our system.
All right. So, but Ajibola, the tribunal also held that INEC, by issuing multiple BVAS reports, INEC's actions amounts to tampering with official document. In fact, it said that INEC's defense in the case was erroneous, and as such, the election was conducted in non-compliance with the Electoral Act. Two issues there. The fact that INEC was accused of tampering with official documents, and the fact that the election was not conducted in compliance with the Electoral Act. What is your position on that? And what should have, in your opinion, been the court's decision on those two issues?
That is very, very, very incorrect. Like I said earlier on, they are making a case of overvoting. And the primary source of accreditation, are two items. One, we have the BVAS untampered with. The result and the displays, the figures input in the BVAS are as obtained during the election. This is what we are saying. The court has it in its custody. The court, the lead judgment does not talk about it at all. It does not evaluate it one way or the other to say, okay, for some reason I've looked at this, I'm not believing this. It was not looked at all. The BVAS inputs, the inputs of the figures on the BVAS in its original form, and the physical inspection conducted on the BVAS in its original forms. All these items were not looked into, and they were admitted as exhibits before the tribunal. So the lead judgment is nothing to write home about. Nothing to write home about. Okay. And like I said, the foundation of that lead judgment is based on malice and bias, particularly establishing this on the imputation of Golololo Buga. What does that mean in the judgment? That is number one. Then number two, I issued an online statement yesterday, and I titled the playback of Kamal. In 2018, when inconclusive rerun was imposed on people of Osun State, attacking their rights, franchise rights, we took it in good faith. There was an election petition for reaching beyond the control of the parties before the court. One of the judges was absent in the proceedings, in the progress of the proceedings in a day. And it happened that when the judgment was to be written, he partook in the writing of the judgment. And on that ground alone, Adeleke lost at the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. The playback scenario here is this now. In non-established law, in all the existing law in Nigeria, there's no way and there's nowhere two judges will co-author a judgment. We had 3 judges on the panel. 2 wrote judgments read in the open court, The third judge did not write anything, did not read anything, but he co-signed a judgment. And anybody that adjudicates on any matter in a judicial capacity, you must read your decision in the open court.
Is that
of the practice before the court?
Is that the position of the law? Is that standard practice, Mr. Ajibola?
Yes, that is the position of the law.
So you're saying that by failing to read her own position on that judgment, the third judge erred?
Yes. It must be separately read in the open court, not by standing in the corner of the office. And there's no way a single judgment will be co-authored. Every judge must write his own independent report, not with the independent judgment. Notwithstanding, it can be a line judgment, agree with this judgment, whatever. Whether it is going to be a line or two, by way of saying, I've read through the judgment of my learned friend, I agree with him. Simple. Thanks.
All right, Barrister.
So as we think now, I think there's another legal issue now that have surfaced from this election petition in Osun State.
All right.
Like we had 6 years back, when because of Osun State case, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria was changed, was amended.
All right, Barrister, let me take you back to the second question my colleague asked earlier. Now, if the tribunal held that the election that was conducted on July 16, 2022 was held in non-compliance with the provisions of the Electoral Act, do you think that a winner should have been declared at all for that election?
Number one, I disagree with any position that may come forth that the last election was not conducted substantially in compliance with the electoral law. Any pronouncement, any opinion coming to establish that, I totally disagree with that opinion and hold it.
Even if it was given by the tribunal?
As given by the tribunal, yeah, it was wrong. That is why we have appellate court. That is part of what we are going to challenge at the appellate court now to get it corrected. And like I said the foundation of that judgment, the reasoning of that judgment, the composition of that judgment, its foundations are in the conclusive part of that judgment, where a judge who's supposed to be an independent umpire is taking a side, even by way of expression, castigating another party as go lo ga. And that is a very serious one.
All right, Mr. Ajibola, Barrister Ajibola, I have seen some documents being bandied around making a case for judicial precedent, saying that there was an other judgment that was issued by a different judge about a different matter that used that particular reference to Kiss Daniel's song. Are you saying that if Governor Adeleke had not been attacked based on his dancing antics, this would not have been an issue, especially seeing as it was the opposition that always made reference to him dancing? Is that the issue now?
That is not the issue. That is what they call judicial ethics. Are you getting it? That's what we have judicial ethics. The input of that statement, the input of Lolo Buga in that judgment is against the ethics of judiciary. And we need to be very careful in Nigeria. We need to be very, very careful in Nigeria, because after the mighty power of the Almighty God as exists in Nigeria, the next in hierarchy is judiciary. And that is why we must not leave that sector go disarray. We must not make them go the way they want, but the way the law says they should go.
All right. right.
We are having a big problem in this country, and we've had it in the past. And I think during Abacha period, that was what brought about a shop panel. And if we need to get it right in Nigeria, we must have a constitutionally placed judiciary monitoring commission. It must be established. So it will not be that, well, I can hide under this, I can hide under this, I can decide what I like, and if they don't like that, then go on an appeal. I think a stop must be put to that.
All right.
If any judge should give judgment that is against the position of the law, such judge should be removed immediately. Until we go into that, we'll be having this kind of mess here and there.
All right.
These are clear issues of law.
Barrister Ajibola, let us talk about this composition now in the ruling of the tribunal. What do you think this purports legally for the ruling, as a whole?
Composition, which of the composition?
The musical composition now, the Lolololo Buga.
No, that is exactly what I'm telling you now. I said I called 5 university professors. I called a professor from IFE. I called a professor from UNILAG. I called a professor from UNIBEN. I called a professor from UNIBADAN. I called from last week. And they centered their opinion to one issue, that the judgment is laced with malice and bias. And when the chairman of the tribunal had a premeditated position, pre-taking position, that this is where I'm going, there's no way justice can feature in a judgment. There's no way justice can feature in its reasoning. There's no way justice can feature in its holding.
All right. Oh, well, thank you very much, Barrister Kami Ajibola, who is a legal practitioner as well as a human rights activist, for your position on the show this morning. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, that's where we rest the conversation this morning. The conversation continues on all our social media handles, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter WSTV_NG. Let us know what you think about the tribunal judgment, but remember to be civil and very, very much what's the word now? Courteous with your comments, yes, so that we don't run foul of the law. Well, that's the interview segment. That's the show this morning. I'll be coming back to bring you Spring Trends.
Thanks for joining us on the show this morning. I am Temi Ajibola Oluola. Have a great day.